So it's time now to look at another of the modulation pages, and it is called the stepper. So I'm going to select the one of the LFO tabs, doesn't matter which one, and on the drop-down menu on the right, I'm going to go down to stepper. So here's my stepper. It's sort of it is a step sequencer. And in this lecture, we're just going to give a quick overview of some of the parameters included in the stepper. Many of them are similar to the LFO, but we'll still go through them quickly anyway. You have a rate knob and an amp knob. So this controls the amplitude of the modulation, and the rate controls the rate or speed with which the step sequencer moves through the steps. Now you also have a sync button, which will pull up our ratio just as in the LFO. So let's first talk about these two faders, and then we'll talk about building how to build your step sequencer. This amp mod fader controls the amplitude of each step, and when it's regardless of whether it's up or down, it has no effect on any of these steps unless these small boxes down here are selected. So in other words, I can control the relative amplitude of each of the steps by selecting one or several of these steps and then using my amp mod fader to control that. And you can see that visually these boxes on the bottom row, these small rectangles, correspond to this amp mod because it turns this little corner here. So I can click all of these. If I just click and drag, I can select or deselect them. The same is true with these glide modulation rectangles below each step. I can select any or many of them. And just the same as the amp mod, these boxes, when I select these boxes, it indicates that I want those particular steps to be affected by this glide mod fader. In other words, I can cause each step to glide into the next step by activating one of these boxes and then adjusting my glide mod fader accordingly. So let's talk about the step sequencer itself. There are 16 possible steps, which you can reduce by clicking and dragging over. You can say, okay, I only want 8 steps, or I only want 4 steps. And then you control the amplitude by just clicking and dragging up, and I can create random amplitude levels like that. Shift clicking will let you adjust the parameter in a more will let you adjust the amplitude with a finer resolution. So if you want to make small changes, and then our little numeric, and then the numerical value appears there as well when you're adjusting. You can also change the start position by dragging this little yellow triangle over, and you can tell it to start, for example, on step 3. So that way the step sequencer will go from 3 to 8 and then back to 3. In our top row, we have some different menus. You can, just as with the LFOs and the envelopes, you can select some presets that are built into it. Just like that. You can also find the steppers that you have saved yourself in the user area. You can save them, for example, and then you'll find them in the user menu. You can delete, and you can also randomize. There's a drop-down menu. You can randomize the levels, you can randomize the glide, or you can randomize both. So you can see there I have now random levels in my stepper and random glide activations, but I'm going to need to increase this glide mod time to really hear that effect. When the snap to grid function, I'm going to reset this. When the snap to grid box is selected, that means when I'm creating these amplitudes, you'll see if I click and hold, it will snap these to whole numbers, 7, 8, 9. And that's really good to know when you're modulating pitch, for example, because then you have a real handy way of doing arpeggiation. So you don't, if it's not selected, then you're going to be, dropping these in at 768, and you have to work really hard to get it to line right up. So that's a good way to create whole numbers. Again, we have a mono button, which syncs up different MIDI notes to the same modulation rather than having each one begin at a different point. And so those are the menu options in the stepper. So that's our overview of these controls, and in the next lecture we'll talk about some really cool applications of the stepper. See you there.